We can test all kinds of treatment. We can test all kinds of intervention. We can test what happens when there is spontaneous remission. We can test at a level we have never been able to handle before. Now I wanted to show you just three fun ones. The first one is aspirin, the energy field of aspirin. Next. You like that? But that's not as dynamic as you're going to find. You see, that's not a living substance. I want you to look at these substances now that are not living. The next one is bufferin. You like that one? That's pretty wild, isn't it? Now, they do not do the same thing, although they may affect pain. And the last one is anisin. So we're talking now, I just gave you a little example here of what fields of material substances look like. And that's where we're moving. Okay, let's turn on the lights. That's some research to influence you, to convince you that it's real and that it has evidence and information that we can use for all kinds of things. It's no longer philosophy, so to speak. Well, let's look at energy fields in the environment. And one which you and I know a great deal about because we keep reading about it is called ELF. Anyone in here doesn't know what an ELF is? Just raise your hand if you don't. All right. ELF. Extremely low frequency contamination in the environment. And do you realize that in the last 30 years we have increased the electrical pollution in our environment 10 million times? I want to say that again. 10 million times we have increased the electrical contamination in our environment. Well, why? Is because we're an electronic age now. And as soon as we're in electronic age, we use more power, more electrical power, and we're also contaminating in other ways. Smoke contaminates. Appliances, old houses. If you think you live in a house that is 20, 30 years old and you have the same wiring you had, you are contaminated, I will tell you. And if we used a Gauss meter up at your 60 cycle plug-ins or your lights, you would see a leakage that is extremely low frequency. Now the power lines that go overhead that we're afraid of and we're concerned about because of their radiation, it is not the high frequency which bothers us, it's the low frequency, because it ties immediately into biological tissue and DNA. And that's where the disturbances take place. The synthetic building materials in buildings are very destructive. I read a whole series of reports on that the other day. We ought to go back to wood and rock and sand and dirt rather than these synthetic things that we're using, because they have contamination, they have radiation. Substances, toxic substances. We can't clean anymore with a plain old bar of soap. We have to have sprays and we have to have everything of this kind. Well, the worst problems, you may know, are in your home. First, it's in the homes and the buildings where we work. First, we stay there lots longer than we stay outdoors. So when we talk about the contamination of the overhead lines, you don't have to worry as much about that as you do the contamination in your own house. I could quote you study after study after study that are done in pristine environments. And the contamination in the home is equal to the contamination in a home that's in one of the great industrial areas where there's smoke and all kinds of contamination. The problem is, of course, that it's over time. It's not the great contamination at one time. It's the fact that it's constant over years and years and years. Riding in cars. Do you realize how contaminating this is? That if you ride in a car for a period of time, you will submit yourself to about 200 to 300 milligauss of electrical contamination. Now you say, well, what does that mean? I'll tell you what it means. We think that 3 Gauss is about all you should have. And now we're even saying 3/10 of a Gauss over time is about what you should have. Subways, which we don't have here, airplanes, which we do have here, and automobiles are the great contaminators of our electromagnetic field. Well, you say, what are we going to do about it? Well, I'm going to tell you some things to do about it. Television isn't good, but it's only 2 milligauss if you're 20 inches away from the television. Now stop and think about that. You ride in the automobile, you're up to 200. It's 2 things. It's both the electrical part of your automobile, and it's the fact that it's moving through space and it's metal. And that's what causes the problem in airplanes, the tremendous radiation problem coming from airplanes. Well, Germany started to solve it. They put all their electrical wires underground. We do it in our more, in some of our areas, but very, very few. There's an interesting thing, though. I don't want to give you the totally bad picture. I want to tell you the exciting things that are happening in the energy fields. This has just happened over in Europe. In Switzerland, Germany, Austria, Italy, and Czechoslovakia, they have a lot of dead lakes. And the lakes are so dead that there's no life. There's no flora, there's no fauna, there's no nothing. And they've been dead for 10 years. A man came in with an idea, and it's an energy field idea. And he didn't put any oxygen in that water. He didn't put any electricity in that water. He didn't put any radiations in that water. He went in and he put a little thing in the middle of the lake, and he put the pattern of frequencies of oxygen on a plate. And the pattern of frequencies of oxygen regenerated the lake in the matter of months and brought back life to the lake. Now, when I tell you this, I want to shock you, because I want to tell you that the frontier of our world is energy fields, and how we manipulate these badly and how we can manipulate them well. I had an experience when I was last in Europe. I'm going to tell you about it because it's so even far out for me that I'd gotten over there. I was very tired and I got a bladder infection. And I was with a medic friend and I said, get me some sulfa, and she said, I'll do it when we get back from the lake. I was with a group called Wicona, and you will hear more about them. This is a group of physicists and engineers and physiologists who have several homes, one in Switzerland and one in England. And they have come up with a laser gun, which is operated by a battery, a red laser. A laser is nothing but coherent energy. And they shoot that gun by giving you a little zap of energy. But what they do is they have information in water. You like that? Now, this is not homeopathic. It's information coded into water. Now, homeopathic started with an original something. It was a substance. And then you gradually got the field. They just put information in water. And they put the information in water that will repair the energy field of diseased beings. They're getting rid of things that you cannot imagine. Now, they have this substance programmed, but it is information in water. Well, I said to him, what can you do for my bladder? And they said, well, we don't have the bladder information in the water right here, you see. But, they said, here's a vial. I want you to spit in the vial. Fine, I spit in the vial. My field carries all the information about what's wrong with my field and everything about how to repair it. Now, I want to say that again, because that is phenomenal. My field carries with it all the information of what is wrong with me medically or any other way and how to correct it. They took that little bit of sputum, they put it in that little hole for the laser beam. They shot me with the vibration of my own sputum, and I had no more bladder infection. Now, I had a good bladder infection. I had sufficient symptoms. Now, think about that. I want you to think about that, and when you leave here, I want you to remember that story, because this will be the medicine of our future. We will take, for example, such as cancer, from a person, we'll take the vibratory field, we will turn it upside down, and we can eliminate the cancer. Thank you. I want to talk about aging. I want to talk about aging because it's one of the most dramatic things to learn about energy fields. The new approach, we've never known what aging was, you know, except to look at it and say, and describe some of the things that happen, but we don't really know. We know it is entropy, that all things from their beginning tend to drop downhill. And so we haven't known too much about that, but let me tell you where we are right now. As soon as tissue loses complexity, it ages. Complexity. And complexity has to do with frequencies. And it has to do with a wide spectrum of frequencies. If tissue has a wide spectrum of frequencies, it does not age. It offsets entropy. This makes it very variable, and this is in the whole physiological system. It is hormones, it is brain waves. You know, as people get older, they can't remember, they can't think. No variability. They are locked into one system. Their skin and their muscle, everything gets locked in, and particularly their heart and their blood vessels. There is no variability. There is no broad band of frequency. It's coming to a point where at last I think we're going to be able to monitor aging, and to know aging at an early age. As soon as the electromagnetic field starts decreasing in its breadth and spectrum, decreasing in its dynamicness, we are starting aging. Do you hear me? We're starting aging, and we're starting it very rapidly. Those oldsters who keep this dynamic system of electromagnetism can continue without the aging process. Loss of complexity. We're learning now that one of the problems with the heart is not the problem of the beat of the heart, but the problems of the frequencies that lie between the beats of the heart, which have to do with the dynamic cycles. This has to do with breathing, it has to do with hearts, it has to do with everything about you. How many of you have heard of free radicals? Good. Do you know what they are? I'm going to tell you. I'm going to tell you what a free radical is. I keep reading that free radicals are a part of aging. Everybody who ages is going to get free radicals as though this is normal. It's not normal. Just because we see it happen does not mean it's normal. It may be average, do you follow? Average meaning it happens, but it doesn't mean it's a normal happening. Well, now, what is a free radical? Let me describe to you. As electrons spin around the nucleus, you will get electrons that fly off. And they fly off, and they are the part that creates the auric field. These are flying off electrons, so to speak. And they're all negative. The ones that fly are negative. The ones that stay put are positive, okay? So these fly off, and you ordinarily expect more negative electrons to come and inhabit and coexist with the positives. The positive got to have a negative. But what happens is it doesn't happen. So here you have positive electrons or positive ions running around hunting for a negative one. And what do? They run through everything. They tear up cells, they tear up tissues, and they destroy parts of the body. Well, it's a simple thing, isn't it? The simple thing is that stress will create it. If you're in a contaminated environment, you don't get enough oxygen, and oxygen is in the negative ion. Wherever you can get oxygen, you have an increase in negative ionizations. Those of you who live by the beach, I hope you walk on the beach, because the beach and the tumbling water has more negative ions. Therefore, you can replenish the negative ions, and your positive ion, which is the free radical, will not do its damage. Cold showers help also. Showers are far better than baths. The refreshment that you get from a shower is the refreshment not from the tingle on your skin or the circulation of your blood, but it is the radiation of negative ions. And this ionization occurs. If you can have around your yard, if you can have bubblers, if you can have flowing water, if you can have any of these, you increase negative ionization. At the deepest level of chaos, we have this magnificent organization. Now that is the part that I want to accentuate. All living things have a chaos pattern. All living things are dynamic. They are not constantly like what mechanical things can be. Mechanical things can be constant and even. Living things have little wrinkles here, and they have little odd frequencies here. It's like saying the bark on a tree is not smooth. A sunset is not perfect. The drip of a faucet goes drip, drip, and then it goes a couple of fast drips. Dynamic things, then, have patterns within patterns. The more advanced the system is, the more chaotic it is, or has the greater chaos. So the energy field is much more dynamic, for example, than the heart. And it's much more dynamic than the brain. So it has a finer and greater chaos pattern to it. Well, why do I say that? Why do I like this chaos pattern? Is because when you have chaos, you just come in and give it a little nudge, and it goes into magnificent organization. I want to say that again, a nudge. You don't have to blast it. You give it a nudge. I'm going to give you some examples of this. If you took a pendulum and you tried to stop that pendulum, you have to give it a real bing, bang. Do you realize that in healing, and you've seen it happen so many times, that if you come in with your own hand, or a healer who isn't really much of a healer and has not healed before, can come in with a field which is slightly different or more stable, and you can reorganize a field which is quite sick. Did you know this? Takes a very little bit. Why do you suppose homeopathics work? That's not the big blast of chemistry and drugs. It is a nudge, so to speak. Why does prayer work so powerfully? It's a nudge at the right time. Why does meditation work? When you look at these things, they are so simple in terms of greatness of force. They have magnificence of force. But the subtleness is what makes the chaos systems work. And wherever we can bring in that subtle nudge to bring it back into its normalcy, we will bring systems out of illness. We'll bring systems out of more random nature. So the sensitive part of chaos we use, and that sensitive part means that just a little bit of change. We don't have to have the massive changes. Let me give you a couple of examples. I've seen it and I've done it. A woman with asthma who had stopped breathing. Now that's pretty powerful. She had stopped breathing. A healer came in and grabbed her by the feet, brought into that system energy. She was in a chaotic pattern. She was in a pattern that was random, so she had stopped her breathing. There was no stimulus in a normal breathing pattern. And by the holding of those feet, the person started to breathe again. You can say she was brought back from the dead. You can say that the chaos organization was there, and the gentle nudge at the right time brought it back. I have brought back cardiac dysrhythmia. It's very simple. It is so simple, I'm wondering why we have 400,000 pacemakers put in every year. Did you realize that? 400,000 pacemakers are installed every year to pace the heart because it's dysrhythmic. You can bring back a dysrhythmic heart by getting rid of the dysrhythmia in the field. The field is first. And if in that field of disorganization you have a neurological system that eventually goes into sync with that system, you will get cardiac dysrhythmia. I did it first inadvertently, didn't know what I was doing, and since that I do it very advertently. And that is, we can teach a person how to change their energy field dysrhythmia, and that occurs before the cardiac dysrhythmia occurs. Cardiologists now are beginning to, a whole new meeting, National Institute of Health, on the subtleness of the energies of the heart that they have never looked at. And it's between the spikings they're now looking, and the healthy heart has a soft chaos pattern. Soft meaning there are a lot of random things going on in there. And as soon as you get no more random things going in there, you are susceptible to a sudden heart attack. Loss of variability. A great loss of variability. You can't cope with change. My internist, every time I get sick, and I get sick too because I overdo mostly, every time I get sick, she gets amazed at how fast I pop back. For my age, I pop back real fast. It's because my field is very dynamic. It has a great range, and therefore it can handle all these things and keep moving. It's when it gets locked in and structured, as it does as we get older. Well, what are we going to do about all this? I've talked to you about several things. I've talked to you about energy field is the primary source of the interaction of a person with his environment. And whatever happens to you, whether it comes in through your mouth and you ingest it, or it comes in through your nose and you assimilate it through the lungs, it's your field that gets it first. And I have found that the field responds a matter of fractions of a second to a second before we ever pick up anything in the nervous system or pick it up in the brain. So why don't we go to the field and start treating? That is our place of primary treatment. I want you to have a dynamic field. And if I had time, I'd start teaching you how to get a dynamic field by your own thought processes. But the dynamic field looks like this. It's got low frequencies, middle frequencies, higher frequencies, and high frequencies. And by that, you can interact in all kinds of ways. The person who, no matter how conscious they are, is way up in the high frequencies and none of the middle and the low, they're in medical problems. They're going to get sick, and they're going to get very sick. The person who is on all of the low frequencies and none of the higher ones, they also get sick, because their field is not variable, it is not dynamic, it doesn't have a capability of adapting at all. It has breadth then, it's variable, it has strength, and it has power, which means it has quantity, lots of energy connected with it. Now, one of the things that's happening right now, our fatigue syndrome, is an energy field problem. I brought several people out of this particular situation by affecting their energy field. It is not primarily a chemical medical problem. It's an energy field problem. And the field is so low it doesn't even feed the tissue. Let me just conclude and bring you now back to what I've tried to say to you. I tried to present to you a new model of the human being and the physical body in understanding health and in understanding how we can move from disease states. I talked to you about aging, and that aging was aging first in a field that had lost its variability and therefore had lost its capability to interact in the world. And therefore it feeds the body, which is downstream, so to speak. It feeds it, and if it feeds it richness, it will feed it health. If it feeds it the opposite, which is narrowness and restrictions, it will also feed it a state which will come into disease and come into dysfunction. I talked about the body's chaos pattern. Chaos pattern meaning that it is so dynamic in the field that all we have to do is just move it a little bit, which means you don't have to go through these great and horrendous things. You have to have a life in which you constantly feed your electromagnetic field. But you do not have to keep shocking it. You don't have to have the constant medications that many of us are on if we stabilize the field. It makes the responsibility yours. You have to assume the responsibility. I think it's not okay just to take vitamins. I do take vitamins, yes. But I think it's not okay just to take vitamins and keep your body clean and do enough exercise. You also have to be concerned about The electromagnetic field, because that's where disease starts, that's where health starts. And I'm looking for the time in which we will have a medical examination of the field and not of the tissue. Because when we have a medical examination of the tissue, we only see where it is now, and you can get a medical exam, your heart's fine, and walk down the steps and fall dead. If you get a electromagnetic field test, we would know how confused your field is. We would be able to intervene at periods of time there. Well, I'm excited because I think we're coming into the longer and the healthier life that we can lead, providing we say that it's like brushing your teeth, it's like taking a bath, it's like eating proper foods. We also must nourish this part of us. Now, this is not my lecture tonight to talk about emotions and spirituality, but that's another one.
Thank you for your support of Bioenergy Fields Foundation. Bioenergy Fields Foundation is a non-profit foundation organized by Dr. Valerie Hunt for the purpose of furthering science for the ultimate good of humankind. For more information on Dr. Hunt's lectures or the exciting new world's first auric field tapes now available in the catalog, please call 310-457-4694 or write P.O. Box 4234, Malibu, California 90265.